Hi everybody, and welcome to my last video. So I took some notes while I was reading through your final discussion sessions, and there was just three things that I wanted to talk about and then just close off sort of the course. So there were three areas where I noticed that there were multiple groups that had sort of some misconceptions or perhaps didn't quite understand the course content. And the first one was sort of the difference between metacognition and socio-metacognition or group cognition. First of all, I think that the definitions that many of you used for metacognition were a little narrow or too broad. And that makes perfect sense because metacognition is a very sort of confusing word. It has been used for a variety of different things, and so people use it in different ways. So for this course, when we were talking about metacognition, it is students' knowledge about their thinking processes and their ability to pay attention to and regulate them in order to improve their learning. And usually when we talk about metacognition, they're referring to sort of the individual level. And so that is the primary way that it is analyzed and discussed in literature. Now in recent years, there has been a push to think about collaborative discourse as a form of external cognition. And so cognition in the head is improved when people are aware of and try to manage and improve and optimize that individual learning process. And so they're using the same logic for this group cognition, right? When people get together to make sense of things, solve problems, or create new knowledge, they argue that that process itself, that discussion, is a form of thinking that occurs in the social plane, and in order to improve that process, the group has to practice group metacognition or socio-metacognition, which is the knowledge of how the group is thinking together and the ability to pay attention to those discussion processes and to monitor and regulate those discussion processes over time. So it's not the same thing as, just being able to, know who people are and where they're coming from, though in some lines in industrial organizational psychology, they do talk about that, which is known as transactive memory. And there's other ways of looking at it. But when we're talking about socio-metacognition, that's what we're talking about. And part of the reason why I use CREATE is because the concept of collective metacognition is really complicated. Because a group is sort of a nested thinking environment where you have individuals who are thinking and making sense of course content, while at the same time trying to make sense of what someone else has said, and at the same time also trying to make sure that everyone in the group is understanding each other and what they have said. So there's all these things going on in a group context. And so thinking is happening at an individual level, and it's happening at a group level, and it's happening sort of in between people as well. And that sounds easy to understand, but to really understand the implications, I gave you an object to think with. And what I mean by that is I gave you an experience, a lived experience that you could draw on to make sense of this very complex theory, and that was the CREATE system. You could think about how individual preparation for the discussion can impact the quality of group thinking that happens. So if everyone, is reading all the readings and taking notes and keeping tabs of the pages and really thinking about and referring to those things, you're going to have a far more sophisticated level of collective thinking. But it's also affected by the interactions that happen at the level of the group. So even if everybody prepares, but all everybody does is just copy and paste their ideas into a chat, but nobody extends someone else's idea, asks them to elaborate, pushes them to think harder and beyond what they have done individually, then the quality of collective thinking will also not be that great. So that's what the system is intended to support. It actually is intended to support people's understanding of important collaborative and sense-making processes, and it gives them a way to go back and revisit their discussions and really analyze their strengths and weaknesses, and not only provide suggestions for improving, but once you input in the system what you think your weaknesses are, the system actually provides you with concrete strategies as well. And so, that process of, having conversations, analyzing the conversations based on some desired outcome, trying to analyze where you are and where you want to be, and then reflecting on that process, trying to come up with a plan or strategy for improving, and then revising that over time. That in and of itself is the process of general metacognition. But you can apply that process to yourself as an individual to think about, analyze, and improve upon your own individual learning processes. Or you can do it the way that it happens in the system, which is at the level of the group. Notice that when you're reflecting, you're not scoring individuals and you're not talking about individual problems, you're talking about interactions between people and how the group is making sense of things collectively. Okay, and so theoretically, the notion is that if we want people to improve how they engage in collaborative sense-making and problem solving, we have to provide some sort of training or guidance, because there's just too much research that shows that the average person does not engage in those collective sense-making processes very well. Okay, all right. So that was my bit on socio-metacognition versus metacognition. The other thing, and I threw something in there which comes from Papert, which was what you read about constructionism and fabrication and making. There's this notion of knowledge needs to be constructed through these lived experiences. And there's this quote from Papert in his book where he talks about the fact that he could tell you why these things are important, but you wouldn't necessarily understand it because you have not experienced what he has experienced and seen what he has seen. And so part of the reference of constructionism, in particular with children, is that when they have, or adults actually, when they have concrete things to manipulate and touch, when they can see for themselves, or you can create experiences that simulate or mimic what it is that you want them to understand, then you give them an object to think with. You give them a tangible thing that they can use to make sense of. Now, most people interpret objects to think with as manipulatables, physical objects, like physically drawing, physically building, physically making. I interpret it a little bit different. I think that cognitive experiences, those are also objects that you can think with. They are cognitive tools that you can draw on to make sense of things. So that's just food for thought, and sort of another explanation as to why making is a powerful thing. And so whether you are fabricating things in a fab lab, whether you are designing stories to share with other people, even if you are creating teaching experiences for others. All of these things can serve as previous objects, previous things that people can build upon. So, okay, there's my thing on Constructionism, which comes from theories of, and this is another important thing, Constructionism is a pedagogy, a model for instruction, which is derived from theories of constructivism, which is how people create knowledge, okay? All right, so one of the final things that I wanted to talk about was the myth of digital natives. A lot of you, well, I would say at least 2 or 3 teams, brought up the notion of digital natives and the fact that students are far more capable of using technology and expect more sophisticated ways of interacting. And I wanted to speak to that because there is some truth to that. Students today have far more opportunities to engage with technology and are accustomed to having information at their fingertips and interacting with very sophisticated forms of software, right? And so that is one aspect of it. But the part that a lot of research has shown to not be completely accurate is the fact that they can use this technology in more sophisticated ways. The reality is that the majority of students, I would assume, this is my assumption, are probably using technology as a means of transmitting information. So they're going online to websites, they're getting information, they're watching videos. That they have far less experience with creating things with technology. I saw this in some research that I was doing at an elementary school, where students didn't know what a desktop was and did not have any familiarity with any features that actually created content. So QuickTime, uploading pictures, documents, anything that had to do with sort of the creation and sharing of things that they themselves had done. They had very little experience with using. And so, this is something that you should be aware of. Many students still do not know how to search for information well, or how to critically think about and evaluate the quality of information that they find on the web. And so all of these things we talk about, and there is a notion that some people have also discussed, which is that literacy in this day and age needs to go beyond reading of text to incorporate digital media literacy, because it's becoming an increasingly important aspect of learning as well. And so that is something that I just wanted you guys to also think about and be aware. In teaching students in the College of Information Sciences and Technology and here in the College of Ed, I've been surprised by how many students do not know how information is created and stored on computers, or the fact that once you create and share something on the internet, it lives forever, even if it is in a private space, and even if you delete it. There is always a remnant of it there that can be found. And so this is an important thing for people to think about when they are on social media, when they are sharing things, or when they are storing things on the internet and in the cloud. And so these are all really important things that I would encourage all of you to become more aware of. I know that for those of you who feel like there is more that they would like to know about those types of things, there is a free online book which is called Blown to Bits. I think I may have already suggested it in our course. It's a really simple, great read that really explains these ideas, the ideas of internet, the ideas of privacy, and some of the issues associated with security as well. Okay, all right, so now, wrapping up the course. Many of you very eloquently stated some of the main aims of this course. This course was not intended to concretely show you how to use different types of technology. It was more trying to give you ways of thinking about how to use technology. And the main message that the course aimed to provide is that technology is neither helpful nor harmful in and of itself. It can neither interfere with or enhance learning in and of itself. What really determines whether a technology is useful or harmful is how it is used, when it is used, and how that use is, supported and orchestrated. What technologies you choose to use for what purposes is important, and so thinking about what type of learning you want to support and what type of learning you think is important, and you are emphasizing through the creation of activities and technological supports is an important thing to consider. So if you think that an important aspect of learning is sharing your ideas with other people and developing new representations, new ways of making sense of the world, and learning how to engage in discourse about a variety of different things and create new ideas out of it, then you have to ask yourself whether you are providing students with opportunities to use technology for that purpose. Now, I know some of you are not sold on group learning, and for good reason. Though I am a researcher in computer-supported collaborative learning, I'm the first to tell you that all projects should not be group projects. The only projects that should be done by groups are those which are complex, those that do not have right answers, and those that do not primarily require memorization. If it's something that one person can do by themselves, then one person probably should. So having said that, why did I let you guys work on group papers? Because one person could do a paper. Well, that is because many of you in this course are PhD students or aspiring PhD students. Some of you are teachers, and as a result of that, you will have to work together with other people to write articles, reports, or create curriculum. And so for that reason, learning how to collaboratively edit, write, and work on a document is important. And so that's why I provide that opportunity, but I do not require that. So if any of you wanted to do an individual paper, you could, and I left that up to you. A lot of the course is done individually, your readings are individually, but I do integrate some aspects of the discourse and collaborative sense making throughout the course. I do so because it is different when you read something. You think you understand it and it makes sense to you. When you have to explain that to someone else in real time, it becomes more apparent that you might not understand those things quite as much. It also gives me an opportunity to see how you are actually thinking about these topics and be able to provide you some feedback like I do in these videos where I talk about some of the misconceptions and give you sort of some feedback. And so, that is why I focus on collaboration, and why I use technology to support that, because that is an important thing in my own personal teaching philosophy. However, each of you needs to really think about what types of skills are important to you and what you would really like your students to get out of your courses or experiences that you create for them. And once you decide that, then you can start thinking about what technologies might be the best tools to support that. And then once you do that, you can integrate those technologies and then you can evaluate them to see how well they actually did in accomplishing those aims. So really the main cusp of this course is that when you use technology as a learning tool, it's not just about picking a technology and integrating it into the classroom. it is an ongoing decision-making and analysis process that you have to do as your dispositions about learning change, as the needs of your students change, or as technology changes, and so it should be ongoing. So that's really the main thing I hope that you get out of this course. And along with all the very different ways that you can use technology to support different aspects of learning that go beyond just transmitting information. All right, with that, I would like to thank you all for being in the course and for taking part in the Yammer activities. I will be analyzing all of the activities, and one of the things that I personally learned this semester is that Yammer may not be the best tool to use with a smaller number of students. I've used Yammer in the past with about 20 students. This is the first time I've had such a small class, which is about 10 students or so. It wasn't as interactive. And so if I do choose to use it with a small number of students, I may need to put some more constraints like you suggested, where we require one post early in the week and one post later on, where I might have to look at other social media technologies that could allow you all to connect with each other across your different groups and give you more of a sense of a whole class discussion. Okay, so that will be what I will be thinking about. And besides that, you should be working on your papers. I hope that you are making good progress, and do remember to reach out to me if you need any help. Okay? All right. Thank you all very much, and I will look forward to reading your final projects next week. Bye.